The idea that we have is to take a book over 21 weeks together, so just one short chapter each week. The book is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And as we read this book, we want to ask ourselves, what does this book mean for us and for our parish community? This book is written by John Maxwell, purportedly the #1 leadership author in the world. This is his best-selling work, the 21 Irrefutable Laws on Leadership. He begins with the most important law. So tonight, according to him, what we're studying is the #1 law of the #1 book of the #1 leadership expert in the world. How's that for an introduction? So the first law, there are going to be 21 laws that we look at. The first law we're calling the law of the lid. Essentially, and all of us have a lid on our leadership. The question is, how high is your lid? Because the higher your lid is, the higher our lid is as a church, the higher we're going to be able to go. The lower our lid, there are some churches with leaders, pastors who have a lower lid. They don't tend to grow. They're probably the same size they were years ago, right? So as we raise our lid, ideally, we'd be raising the effectiveness of our parish and its ministries. So, if leadership then determines effectiveness and our potential to impact organizations like this church, what it is, it begins with the example of a story. We've heard the story of Dick and Maurice. Dick and Maurice were two brothers from New Hampshire who decided they were going to move to California in search of the American dream. So Dick and Maurice get a job first on a movie set, and they decide to buy a theater. That doesn't work out so well for them. Eventually they decide in 1937 to open a small drive-in restaurant in Pasadena, California, where they serve hot dogs and fries and shakes. So we have a hot dog joint now that these brothers, Dick and Maurice, have together. 3 years later, they decided to expand the menu. Instead of just serving hot dogs and fries and shakes, they started serving things like beef and pork sandwiches, hamburgers, other things. The business exploded. They were making $200,000 a year, which in that time was some good money. They were able to pay themselves a salary of $50,000 each in 1940. So eventually they started making changes to this drive-in restaurant that they had. They got rid of the car hops. Any of us old enough to remember car hops? When they would go out to the cars, they said, wait a minute, this is costing a lot. That's a human capital model that we're not really interested in. They switched to paper products. Those of us old enough to remember, restaurants used to serve in other ways before we have the fast food products we have now. They reduced their menu to focus on hamburgers. You know where this story is going? They created the speedy service system to fill customer orders in 30 seconds or less. But this restaurant, McDonald's, was just that. It was a restaurant in Pasadena, California, or Pasadena and then later in San Bernardino, California. They managed that restaurant well, but for them that was it, was this restaurant. Another man comes along, his name is Ray Kroc, maybe we've heard his name before. In 1955, Ray Kroc comes along, met them in 1954. By 1955, he had permission to begin the McDonald's system, simply taking the model that they had built and scaling it, right? How can we sell this? How can we franchise this? Other people are interested in doing what these McDonald's brothers have done so successfully. So Ray Kroc took this model. In 1961, he bought exclusive rights to McDonald's for $2.7 million. I have a feeling that was a pretty good investment for him. Because today, McDonald's is known throughout the United States. It's known internationally. All began with two brothers, but these two brothers, their leadership lid was too low for them to take this model to the next step. It took someone with a different vision, with a different level of leadership to be able to take McDonald's to the next level. So what John Maxwell does is he tries to explain it in terms of the two graphs that we have here. On one, we have two axes here where we can rate ourselves on two different scales. At the bottom of the scale is success, dedication. How hardworking are you? And then you draw out the line as far as you are hardworking. And then how high does that line go depends on your leadership ability. What's your leadership ability? So you draw out the line to the right as high as you think you'd rate yourself on success, dedication, how hardworking you are. And then you go up on a scale of 1 to 10 where your leadership would be. And essentially that would be the box of how hardworking and what your leadership ability is, because essentially that's how effective you're going to be. What John Maxwell is saying is, if we work that hard, just imagine if we were to raise our leadership ability, what happens? Suddenly you're raising the lid, he calls it, right? You can work really, really hard all day long, but if you don't have any leadership skills, what is that going to do for this church, for this parish? Follow me? And that's what I love about it. We have lots of hard working people, dedicated people. The challenge that we have now is taking that hard working attitude and just building on that, increasing our leadership skills and knowledge together, because that's where we start to rise. So John Maxwell concludes that chapter. These are all short chapters, as you see. Essentially saying, when a person is put in charge of a group, that's where you see how high his or her leadership lid is, right? When someone's named a football coach, this is for the Longhorns fans among us, right? What happens when the coach doesn't perform? We get rid of that person. Why? Because it all depends on that person and the leadership lid of the organization. We try to get leaders in organizations who can lift the lid, John Maxwell says. Essentially, our challenge, it seems, here at Holy Family is to figure out, okay, what does all this mean for us? When's the last time we thought about our own leadership ability and our own focus on leadership? Because what this book is going to try to do over 20 more chapters is try to help us to raise our leadership ability, to raise our lid, so that by raising that lid, if we keep working hard, we're just going to expand our effectiveness as a parish community. So the questions that are at the bottom of the page, simply for us to think about and reflect on during the next week, is how's your work ethic and how's your leadership ability? How would you chart yourself on this map? How high would you rate your success, dedication, or your work ethic? How high would you go in terms of rating your leadership ability? And is that just you blowing smoke, or would others agree with that? Or maybe that's the better question. How would others rate your work ethic, how hardworking we are? How would others rate our leadership ability, to sort of figure out where we are on that graph? What characteristics comprise good leadership ability? What does it mean to be a good leader? For us to reflect on that over the course of 21 weeks and 21 brief lessons. What does it mean to be a good leader, so we can try to be like that ourselves? How has your leadership lid negatively affected a certain project or task? Right? Sometimes we find ourselves in situations where our leadership ability just is not enough. I'm thinking, I was named president of a high school at 33 years old. I appreciate the bishop who named me to that position, but you're in a different position at 33 years old than you are when you get more experience under your belt. Final question, how dedicated have you been to developing yourself as a leader? What are you doing to develop yourself as a leader? No pressure, but our success as a parish depends on the leadership ability of all of us who share of our time and talent with this parish. Think about that for a moment. If each one of us were to dedicate ourselves to raising our leadership ability, each one of us together, we're talking about some incredible potential here. Jesus used the analogy of dough rising, right? You put yeast in the dough. Hopefully what this book is going to do for our church, for our parish community, is simply put a little yeast into the dough. We have the dough here. We can poke the dough of this parish. Imagine putting a little yeast into that dough and watching it rise over 21 weeks of lessons in leadership. So the final point of this chapter, if anyone wants to purchase this book, I'm sure you can find it online. Each chapter is only like 8 short pages long. So if not a lot of reading, to be able to go through a book like this, if anyone wants to follow along, I'm happy to have you do that. Remember, our collective leadership lid determines how high we rise as a parish.
What if you're just a follower?
Ooh, what if you're just a follower? So in leadership studies, that's a great question, because in leadership studies we talk about leaders and followers, and there's something, we talk about leadership. One thing we don't talk about enough is followership. There are certain qualities of being a good leader. There are certain qualities of being a good follower, too. One of the challenges for any leader, though, is figuring out how do we continue to raise up other people to do what we're doing, because the grand challenge is making ourselves irreplaceable. You follow me? As much as I love Becky, do you mind if I use this example? As much as I love Becky leads our environment committee and she spends so much time thinking through the environment. But if the Lord calls Becky home tonight, and Lord, we better not do that. But should the Lord call Becky home, there you go, right? Please wait until after the trip on Sunday. It's us figuring out, how do we make ourselves, we cannot make ourselves irreplaceable. Becky's challenge in the environment committee, or any of our challenges in any ministry is, how do I make sure that I am not irreplaceable? Father Jamie, should the Lord call him home? Okay, we need to make sure that the leadership is such in this parish that we can keep going in our individual ministries, as a parish, as a family, in whatever organization, when certain people are called home, or whatever happens in the lives of people, right? Organizations change, and in school settings, right? When a principal changes, it changes the environment of that school, right? And that person's leadership potential, his or her leadership ability, colors the culture, influences the culture and the environment. Same in our families, right? The parents set the tone in many families, right? If you're an autocratic sort of parent, and demanding, and that sets one tone in the house. How do we lead our children? Those of us who've done the task of parenting, right? There's no lying here. It's not necessarily an easy task leading those young minds and hearts. So what if we're only a follower? I suspect that the challenge is, how do we look at ourselves and see ourselves leading as followers even?
I don't like being a leader. I can do it, but I don't like it. It's a lot of responsibility.
Being a leader is a lot of responsibility. Are there other things we don't like about leadership, any of us?
Scary.
Is scary? Why is it scary?
Well, because you don't know if anybody's going to follow. You don't know if you're going the right direction.
That's why I suspect part of the task of leadership is making sure leadership is all about walking with people. Because if you think you're leading, the saying goes, if you think you're leading but no one's following, then you're just taking a walk. Right? So if I'm leading, okay, how do I do it such that everyone is going with me? Right?
Part of the community, have them invested.
An example might be, we'll come to you in just a moment, Vincent. An example might be we're doing this pilgrimage on Sunday to burn it. Okay, Father Jamie has an idea. Oh, I'd like you to go burn it. Okay, now, how do you get other people excited about that? I have a feeling there are ways that we could have presented that announcement in a very different way, where after Mass people are like, I'm not going to burn it with Father Jamie. You follow me? Or with whomever. It's setting that tone so that whatever we're doing, it's sort of drawing people along with us. Vincent?
I was just going to say, the difference is being a follower and a leader. I think even though you're a leader, you're also a follower. Because you have to keep an open mind of who you're leading. Maybe they have suggestions to help you lead. And you have to be a follower and a leader at the same time.
I think that's an insight. So there's this delicate dance between leaders and followers, where yes, the followers are following the leader, but they're only following the leader so long as there's this reciprocal dance. You follow me? Right? Have you ever lost confidence in a leader? Right? And suddenly you decide, I don't think, right? So as a leader, how do you continue to do that dance?
Because in my experience with working in nightclubs, I've been a manager for nightclubs, successful nightclub for 25 years. And every time we have a meeting, I never sit at the head of the table. We sit in a circle because there's no one leader. We all sit in a circle. We're all the leaders trying to make the club successful.
So any leader of any club or any organization influence the culture by simple things, right? Where he or she sits, the tone that he or she uses, the words that he or she uses, right? Often as leaders we use words more like we and us rather than I and me. How do we motivate other people to join us on the journey, and even to step up and to see and to do things? How do we help to give them the confidence to do things, right? I'm imagining, going back to the example of the Environment Committee, for Becky or anyone else who's been part of our Environment Committee, it's sort of like the first time that we're thinking of this, we're thinking, I don't know if I have a lot to offer to a thing like the management committee, but someone has to do it, so we step up. And isn't part of it that we sort of learn and grow as we go along, and we try to find ways to be able to grow in that area? Okay, if I'm on the environment committee now, who can I talk to? Oh, maybe I'll call Margaret and see what ideas, or maybe I'll talk to Father Jim. Maybe I'm going to read a book or do some research on the internet. How can we increase our skills in that area? Same with leadership or anything else that we're doing. Parenting, right? How do I become a better parent? Oh, maybe I need to ask a few people for advice on the situation that I'm facing at home. Right? Maybe I need to Google a certain topic, right? Teenage daughter meltdowns, whatever it is, right? How do I find ways to be able to grow in my skills as a parent, as a leader, as whatever capacity I find myself?
Sometimes the leader can become a dictator, like if he doesn't like what you do.
So sometimes
He already
leaders-
has the idea, but if he wants it his way or the highway.
So what happens in those situations, if the leader wants it a certain way and it's his way or the highway, if Father Jamie comes in one day and says, oh, what's a good example of this?
But if you don't want that, then where are you from?
So good, let's use this example. If Father Jamie came in one day and had the type of personality where he just ripped into Becky for whatever he saw, right? Something's not hanging straight out there. Not that Father Jamie would notice anything. If something is not hanging straight, and Father Jamie just is having a bad day and rips into that person, what is that going to do to affect, how is that going to affect that person and his or her desire to be a part of this team that we're creating, right? It's thinking about the effect of our words and actions. And those who work with her, I mean, the stories like that spread, right? Man, when the rest of the environment committee is consoling Becky because she's in the back, I mean, these things that affect entire organizations, in families, right? Things are said and done in families, right? Where it starts to tear at the fabric that unites us. Okay, how do we come together here? How do we bring all this together, especially in our role as parents or as leaders in whatever context?
That's where you have to learn to have tact.
We have to learn to have tact. Social skills. We're talking, the new word is emotional intelligence. I shouldn't say new, that goes back to the 1980s and 90s. But, we can be really smart in many things. You can be book smart, you can be smart in many things. But the term is, how smart are you emotionally? How do you work with people? What are your social skills like? When it comes to that crooked picture on the wall, how do you handle that situation?
Where do you go to school for that?
Where do you go to school for that?
It's actually a lot of courses on that.
Yeah, and actually,
There really is a
so
lot.
when we were young, there wasn't a lot on this. In schools today, we actually have a word for it. We call it social emotional learning. The impact that our kids and grandkids are learning about this, the impact that their words and actions have on others, and teachers become leaders in that respect. When they see something in the classroom, they're sitting the kids down and talking through, okay, just what happened, and how did people feel about this, and what are we going to do differently in the future? Social emotional learning. But the author, Daniel, wrote a book, Emotional Intelligence. Google emotional intelligence. If I'm not mistaken, Daniel Goldstein wrote the initial works on this, talking about how it is that we just need to be conscious about how our words and actions are affecting other people. Everything that we say, that we do, nonverbals.
Whether you pull the kid up in front of the class and all the other students, there's a lot of...
The things that we do overtly, but also we have other words we use like microaggressions, or maybe the word that you've heard is passive aggressive. Sometimes we deal with these things in ways that are less healthy. We all find ourselves doing these things in different relationships, in small ways. Something, we don't like something in a certain way, and we find ourselves expressing that in different ways. Okay? What does all this mean for us in our relationships? Because in the end, we're on this journey together. If you're married, got news for you, you're in the journey together, right? In whatever relationship. Or relationship, it's people. How do we make this work? And a lot of it comes down to following and that delicate dance, right? That delicate dance.
I'm glad I'm here tonight.
Rick, I knew him very well. He was always saying, gosh, I mean, if the bathroom is not running over there, they come to me and ask me, Father, what are we going to do? Like
I'm a plumber.
have to go to. He was tired of that. He was saying, it's your church. But a lot of people didn't, they were always like, a lot of us were, whatever the Father wants, we'll do that. Because we were trained like that. It's a church. Sometimes it's, everything goes to the police, you know. And what you're saying is, you want us to also make decisions too, right?
Part of it is, do we want to have the type of parish where everything falls to Father Jamie? Father Jamie, the toilet's broken. Okay, Father Jamie, I know a lot of things. I don't know how to fix a toilet, right? But I mean, it's one of these. It's almost an opportunity, you know, for us to figure out. Okay, the toilet's broken. What do we do here? Because maybe it's not just looking at Father Jamie. I have a feeling if we looked around the table, I have a feeling we could almost ask ourselves, okay, does anyone around the table know a plumber? You know, does anyone, first of all, does anyone around the table know how to fix this toilet? And if not, do any of us know who we can call to fix? I have a feeling that all of us together, that's where the strength is of this parish community, because that's why we talk about our collective leadership lid. Because, yeah, we each have a leadership ability here. If we were to average all those together, so, you know, that sort of creates this lid that we have. How do we lift this lid so that when the toilet's broken, maybe it's not running to Father Roy or Father Jamie, maybe it's us figuring out, what do we do in these situations? When someone comes to me, it just happened on Sunday morning, someone comes to me, Father, the toilet's leaking. I don't know how to respond. And I don't want to pretend like I'm not interested, but my response is essentially, you know what, do you think you can problem solve this? You can, you know,
Oh, no.
you know, it's finding a way, how do we fix this together? People are waiting for me to begin Mass in 30 seconds. I'm not sure that I should be spending time fixing a toilet if someone else can be able to do it. Community organizers have a saying, they say, don't do something that someone else can do. Think about that for a minute. That's actually quite profound. Don't do anything that someone else can do, because that's an opportunity for someone else to be part of the action. Delegating, sharing the responsibility, sharing.
Becky, where's her best?
Sometimes,
A friend of mine is a principal, started something over in San Angelo, Rancho Elementary. He was very creative, and he assigned like a plot for a family, like the Garcia family. They're gonna plant all these flowers there, beautify the school. He gave them a lot of power. And, you know, the administration from the top said, I mean, you know, they're planting flowers that they like, and this other family is complaining. Oh my God, poor guy. I mean, but he was delegating a lot of power to the neighborhood, which was going very well. But because somebody was complaining all the time, he was just
So,
doing it.
one of the things I think is important is, as leaders, when we delegate something, is sort of helping to set up what I like to call the guardrails. It's sort of giving parameters, right? So that when it comes to whatever task, they sort of have some expectation. You know, would you do the flower gardens? Okay, it's not just letting you do whatever you want in that flower garden, but essentially, if there's anything that you as a leader need to communicate about your expectations for that flower garden, you know, how do you set that up? Because otherwise, what will happen? It could be anything, right? You see whatever statue appear in that garden, you're like, hey,
The
right?
perimeters weren't set.
There you go. It's a tough
They
challenge.
were also putting up saints in the Virgin of Guadalupe one
Oh,
in the school, so it's hard. Well, doing something.
So this is just the first chapter that we're getting into of 21 chapters. So what I propose is every time that we're together on Wednesday evening, we just take a little step further into the water and see how deep we get together as we talk about leadership and our leadership ability. And maybe what we'll see is after a few weeks, we might see the lid rising a little and rising a little more and rising a little more.